Ok, Alberto, quando vuoi.
Eh,
Sei tu il master della riunione, quindi devi far tu entrare le persone, fai tu, eh. E non mi taccio.
registrando.
Sì, sto registrando.
Bene. So good morning. You should see my screen now. Please let me know if you don't see it. So welcome to this lecture. It is the first of a series of lectures on different topics related to environmental impact assessment. Some of you already know me. We met in the MATLAB class in the course of in modeling and control of environmental systems. My name is Alberto Barause. I'm currently a researcher at the Department of Biology, but I have worked for many years with Luca in the LASA lab. So yes, I'm part of the LASA team. That's my email. The slides are already online in the Moodle website of the class. If you have any questions after this lecture. And whose topic is appropriate assessment. In Italian, it is called valutazione di incidenza, which is a very common authorization procedure that professionals such as engineers, but not engineers, prepare, undergo when working with, as we'll see, plans or projects. And this picture, which is taken just north of Padova, is just an example. You see the Brenta River, and you see mountains, which are all part of the Natura 2000 network, which is related, as we'll see in this lecture, to the appropriate assessment authorization procedure. So what is appropriate assessment? This lecture will be full of definitions because it's about policy, okay? So you have to learn definitions. I'll try to make it not boring the best I can. I mean, so appropriate assessment is a process, an authorization process of preventive nature, meaning that you have to undergo this process before doing something, in particular, a plan or project. So the process to which you must submit any plan or project which may have a significant effect on a site or proposed site of the Natura 2000 network. In red, there are the keywords. So must, it's a compulsory process. It applies to plans or projects. So projects are related to construction works, basically, while plans are instruments of landscape planning, such as a fishery management plan, a traffic management plan, a urban planning tool, something like that. And Natura 2000 network is a network of protected areas that is found all over Europe, and we'll see what it is in more detail in the next slide. So the first thing you have to realize is that effects, so you see, which may have a significant effect, it's written up there. So those effects of our project on the Natura 2000 network can be connected also to plans or projects which are outside the Natura 2000 site. So I'll draw something. Let's suppose you have a river, okay, like this, and you have a factory here which emits smoke. Sorry. This river here is part of the Natura 2000 network. Okay. The factory is sited outside the Natura 2000 network. of protected areas. Nevertheless, the smoke is falling on the river. So even if the fire is outside the Natura 2000 site, it can be an effect on the site. So the construction or the expansion of the factory must be submitted to an appropriate assessment according to European and Italian legislation. Let me find out how I delayed my drawings like this. So appropriate assessment has been defined in a European policy, which is Habitat Directive from 1992, which has created this Natura 2000 network and the related appropriate assessment. So what is the Habitat Directive? It's a relatively old policy, which, however, in my opinion, is very modern, okay? Because even if it dates back to 1992, it's known for short as Habitats Directive, but it is about the conservation of habitats and wild fauna and flora. It has the goal of several goals: promoting the maintenance of biodiversity through the conservation of natural and semi-natural habitats and wild fauna and flora. So natural habitats, you get what they are. Natural habitats are habitats that only exist because of man activities. So they are partly related to, they are not natural, but they have a value for biodiversity. Think, for example, of pastures, pascoli in the Alps. Okay, without some of those pastures, without cows eating the grass, okay, soon, and without men cutting the forests, the shrubs around those pastures, sooner or later they would become forests. Okay, and so those pastures with all the biodiversity host would disappear without the action of men cutting the forest around them and preventing the forest from spreading over the pasture. And yes, the European Union has a political commitment to stop the loss of biodiversity there was a goal to stop it by 2020. We didn't make it, so we have updated our policies. This is, for example, a nice reading, and there is also biodiversity. There are other documents that you can find online about the EU policy approach. That's a good starting point. And in addition to protecting biodiversity, which means conservation, the EU has also the goal to restore, so to recreate, reconstruct natural habitats and species of community interest. We'll see what these things are in a moment. So what I found very modern about this directive is that one of the other goals is to promote biodiversity, but taking economic, social, cultural, and regional requirements into account. This, if you think about this is the definition of sustainability. So protect the environment, preserve the environment, which is here represented by biodiversity, but also taking into account economic, social, cultural needs and regional differences, okay? Not all Europe is the same. And so integration of conservation with the needs of humans. And so this network of protected areas that's represented by the Natura 2000 network is a very peculiar network, because in those protected areas, for example, you can fish, you can hunt, you can construct houses or factories. Human activities are not prohibited as long as they are sustainable. In certain cases, think of the example I was making about the pastures, human activities are actually encouraged because they may contribute to maintaining biodiversity. And what is biodiversity then? There are so many definitions around that you can find in books and on the internet. And for example, in the UN summit in 1992, biodiversity was defined as variability among living organisms. And this, sorry, another colleague of yours entered the lecture. This includes diversity within species, so genetic diversity, between species. So when you have many animal or vegetal species, you have diversity, or diversity of ecosystems. When you have many ecosystems, you have biodiversity. Usually when we think of biodiversity, we think of between species diversity, so many species, but there are other types of diversity. So why should we protect biodiversity? Of course, the first reason that comes to mind is moral reasons. Okay, every living being has the right to exist. Every ecosystem has the right to exist, and so they may have a spiritual value for us. For example, we love seeing I don't know, dolphins swimming, and that's one key point. Okay, but the European policy with regards to biodiversity actually stresses that we need to protect biodiversity because it's useful to us as well. These are two different and complementary arguments, okay? And the second perspective is the ecosystem service perspective. So ecosystems, for example, think of wetlands, they clean water for free, okay? They purify water from nutrients and other pollutants. Ecosystem provide us with food, for example, of the sea. The sea, you don't need to plant seeds to collect fish. You just go out and fish. So it's a provision, as it is called, ecosystem service. Think of bees and other insects and their role in pollinating plants, upon which production we depend for our welfare, for our feeding, for example. I think about the pharmaceutical industry and all the information they find about different molecules in wild plants. I wanted to make an example about genetic diversity. You know that in the US, there is a lot of Irish descending people. There were a lot of Irish immigrants to the United States of America in the 19th century. This was due also to this potato famine that took place in the half of the 19th century. Ireland was a very poor country back then, and a lot of people, especially the poor people, relied for food consumption on potatoes. And the problem was that they relied on just one species, potatoes, and these species had very low genetic diversity. When this fungus, this mold, came spread in Ireland in the middle 19th century, it killed most of the potato plants because they were all genetically different. So if they had more genetic variability, they would have had some plants more resistant to the fungus and they could have made it more easily, but all the plants died, so people were starving and they just left the country, okay? And this is an example of the concrete importance for human welfare of genetic biodiversity. So when we think of animals such as charismatic megafauna, such as the polar bear, and when we think of why we should protect these animals, we usually think about the moral reasons, okay? They have the right to exist, and this is true. But what we come to realize through scientific research is that these animals are not just nice. They have a right to exist, of course, but they are also important to us. And I wanted to make another example about this, about dolphins in particular. Okay, this is from a publication from 21 years ago. You can, if you Google, you find it on the internet. You can download if you use the proxy of UniPD, and it is about the Black Sea. What you see in these 4 plots is time series, so records of time of you should see the pointer of the mouse, right? Can you see it?
Yes.
Thank you. So in this plot up here, you see, sorry, I go back, records over time of the abundance of how many pelagic predators. You see continuous line. Sorry, I shouldn't click. This is the trend over time of pelagic predators in the Black Sea. By pelagic predators, I mean big animals eating fish, such as dolphins, not just dolphins, but also dolphins, okay? So you see that in the past century, dolphins abundance went down. This is a relative scale, okay? So it went down because of overfishing. So dolphins and other big fishes were killed by overfishing. And what happened? You see here the dashed line, the abundance of small fishes, fish that eat plankton, planktivorous fish, it went up. And the nice thing is that these small fishes are eaten by pelagic predators. So these are the predators that went down because of fishing. These are the prey that went up because there were no more predators, okay? In this other plot, you see the same time series. So this is the planktivorous fish. This time it is a continuous line to represent that in this plot, the small fishes are actually the predator, because the other trajectory, the other time series is zooplankton. So small crustaceans, the dashed line, that are eaten by small fishes. So small fishes increased zooplankton, which is the food of planktivorous fishes, went down. And you see that in response, phytoplankton, the dashed line here, went up because zooplankton, the continuous line, disappeared, decreased in abundance. So there was more phytoplankton. And in the final plot, you see the phosphates, which are nutrients needed by phytoplankton to grow. Phosphates dissolved in water went down over time, also because of the increase of phytoplankton. So if you look at these 4 plots together, what you see is that it was a cascade of events, a series of consequential events that was triggered by the disappearance of dolphins and other big fishes. So the disappearance of dolphins caused the increase of big fish, the decrease of zooplankton, the increase in phytoplankton, and the decrease in dissolved phosphates. So the effects of the disappearance of this animal was so strong that it changed the water quality of the ecosystem, okay? So, and actually this increase in phytoplankton led to such bad water quality, anoxic problems, that in the Black Sea, they had problems with tourism, okay? So this is about the economy, okay? We kill big animals and unexpected things, maybe bad for humans, can happen, in this case, to our economy. And if you want to read more about these things, these are titles of a couple of publications about the impacts of biodiversity loss, for example, in the oceans. And somebody even attached a monetary value, so estimated what is the value of these ecosystem services in dollars, okay? This is a very famous publication. It is being cited 1,000 times. It is also being criticized, but it started a research line that's very important nowadays too, okay? The basic idea of this publication is that ecosystem services have a value for humans, so you can also try to attach a monetary value to those services. With Luca, we worked on these things in the Venice Lagoon. in the live Vimine project. If you want to know more about what we did, this is just a link. Okay, we worked on salt marshes in the Venice Lagoon. I'll skip this and go back to the Natura 2000 network, which is the topic of today. So what is this Natura 2000 network? It was established in the Habitats Directive, and the goal of this network was to create a coherent European ecological network. And it was created in Article 3 of the directive, and it's made it protects either habitats, so we'll see how, but a site can contain natural habitats which are protected according to Annex 1 of the directive, or a site can contain species protected according to Annex 2 of the directive. So Natura 2000 sites focus either on habitats or on species. So it's a very wide network. In the EU, we have about 27,000 protected areas in all the European Union. This is the total area. Doesn't mean much to you, maybe, because you don't know how big the EU is, but this is about 18% of the European Union terrestrial surface. So about nearly a fifth of the surface of the European Union is covered by these protected areas. So it is a lot. So you understand why appropriate assessment is such a common authorization procedure. So the Natura 2000 network actually is made of areas defined according to habitats and species, as I was saying in that directive, but it also contains, the Natura 2000 network also contains zone di protezione speciale, special protection areas, which are areas defined in the Birds Directive from 1979, whose codified version is from 2009. And these areas defined in the birds, so-called Birds Directive, are meant to protect wild birds, okay? So the Natura 2000 network has its legal basis both on the Habitat and the Bird Directive. Yes, so one is this, so it contains, as I was saying again, just repeat, two kinds of areas, the special protection areas and the sites of community importance, and the proposed site of community importance, and the special areas of conservation, which are defined in the Habitats Directive. So this is the Bird Directive, this is the Habitat Directive. And site of community importance is SIC in Italian, which means sito di importanza comunitaria. And so an SCI is a site which is important for the conservation or the restoration of a natural habitat in Annex 1 of the Habitats Directive, or for the conservation of the restoration of species protected according to Annex 2 of the Habitats Directive. And may also contribute significantly to the coherence of the Natura 2000 network. SAC, so Special Area Conservation, is actually a sort of evolution of SCI. So it is a site of community importance, which basically things such as management plans have been implemented, okay? So it's the same site, but after it has been taken care of from the management point of view. How is the Natura 2000 network created? on the basis of some criteria that are found in the directive, Habitats Directive, each member state proposes the list of sites which, according to the member states, are important to protect habitats of species, Annex 1 and Annex 2. These are proposed sites of community importance. P stands for proposed. The Commission, European Commission, based on such lists and in agreement with the states, adopts such sites, and these are sites of community importance. And once the site has been adopted, the member states will declare that site a special area conservation, SAC, within 6 years at most. If you don't, there can be infringement procedures. Establishing management priorities in the light of the conservation objective and in the light of the threats of degradation and due to humans. The important thing about this definition, which I understand can be confusing, the important thing is that, you have to do a appropriate assessment for sites of community importance, for sites, special areas of conservation, and also for proposed sites of community importance. The appropriate assessment, valutazione di incidenza procedure applies to all 3 types of sites. I want to spend a very short word about why we speak of the Natura 2000 network as a network, okay? A network means the is meant to stress the fact that you have many sites that are not thought in isolation, but they are thought as a system of interacting sites, okay? Why that? Think, for example, of you have one site, this is the surface on one side, this is the surface of another side, and this is the surface of another side, third side, which is protected. This is configuration A. Let's make another example in red, blue. So you have one side here, you have one side here, and you have one side here, and it is configuration B. Which configuration do you think is it's better from a conservation point of view? Which configuration you think is better for biodiversity? The 2 configurations have the same surface. Okay, so this and this are the same, this and this are the same, this and this are the same. I would say that configuration A is better because if, let's suppose these 3 sites are 3 forests, okay? And you have a fire in this site here, and so every tree is killed. It's more, and suppose you have a fire here and every tree is killed here too. The distance that animals and seeds have to travel to get from here to here and recolonize the lost forest is much longer than here, okay? So configuration B is less resilient. And this is why we think of the Natura 2000 as a network. For example, very often rivers are Natura 2000 sites because they are most important habitats and species, but also because they are ecological corridors. They represent places through which species can migrate, they can disperse and colonize other areas. Let's go on. If you have any question, please ask. The Natura 2000 network is structured in biogeographic regions, which are ecologically homogeneous regions. For example, you see that Italy is covered by the Alpine, by the continental and the Mediterranean regions. which are regions that are supposed to be at least a bit homogeneous from the point of view of management issues, for example. And yeah, this is an example. It's not updated to last year, but it's a good example of the Natura 2000 sites. You see the green areas in the Alpine biogeographical region of Italy. You see how many sites are present. There are some big ones. Let me find the pointer. There are some big ones, such as this one. But you see, there are many small ones that you can hardly see, but they are there. And yeah, so this is interesting also from the point of view of ecological connectivity I was telling you about. For example, speaking of big sites, you have some big sites, Natura 2000 sites in central Italy, the Gran Sasso, and so on, near Rome. And this table, this one is updated to last year, I think. I took it from the Ecological Transition Ministry, the former Environment Ministry of Italy website, and it shows the number of special protection areas or special area of conservation and of sites of community importance. Sorry, these are the birds directive sites. These are the habitats directive sites. These are sites that are either birds or habitat directive or both of them. Okay, so this is the most interesting, this one, the green one, the most interesting part of the table. In Italy, we have 357 protected sites, part of the Natura 2000 network. And yes, and sorry, yes, and the cover. No, sorry, forget what I said. This is wrong. So the green part of the table just contains sites both protected under the birds and under the habitats directive. So, for example, in Italy, we have 2,000 sites protected under the habitats directive, 279 sites protected under the birds directive, and 357 sites protected under both directives. If you look at the aggregate table, which is the most interesting one, the one I was thinking about before. So this is about the Natura 2000 sites in Italy. You see that we have nearly 3,000 sites, and that about 19% of the Italian landscape is covered by the Natura 2000 network, which is a lot. It is a lot because you will also remember that I told you that the appropriate assessment procedure does not apply just to plans or projects carried out within Natura 2000 sites, but also to plans or projects that are outside a Natura 2000 site, but can have a significant effect on the site. So that's really a lot. This is example of maps of those sites in Italy. Again, you see there are big ones, there are small ones that you can't see very well. And looking at the Veneto region, for example, you see, for example, this is Padova, okay? The Brenta River is a Natura 2000 site because it's an important protection site for habitats and species, but also because it's an ecological corridor. You see, it is this one connecting the Alps to the Euganei and to the Euganei area and to the other protected areas that are found along the Adriatic coast, such as the Venice Lagoon, the Po Delta, and so on. And sorry, if you want to download these things, you can either go on the cartographic portal whose link is here, or you can go to the Natura 2000 viewer whose link is here, and you can, if you click that link, you would end up in such a website, and these purple areas, they are Natura 2000 sites, and if you click on the sites, you can get information about those sites. Yeah, you see, for example, the Venice Lagoon is a protective site according to the Natura 2000 network. And so, since you're going to become an environmental engineer, now we will focus in the next 15 minutes on what is appropriate assessment, this authorization procedure that is actually the topic of this lecture. So it was defined in the Article 6 of the Habitat Directive, which requires that you do this appropriate assessment. Even on proposed sites, you see, so significant effect on a site or proposed site of the Natura 2000 network. And so all plans, and this I said, also see individually or in combination with other plans or products. So you can, I don't know, if you can, let's say that a municipality, a city, creates an industrial zone, an industrial park near a Natura 2000 site. And every factory that's going to be built according to that industrial park planning will emit smoke that's going to end up in the Natura 2000 site. The effect of the project is not just the effect of a single factory, but it's the sum of the effect of all the factories. You can do what is called in jargon salami slice, okay? You have to take the impacts of different works into account together. Okay, one important thing to remember is that appropriate assessment is not binding authorities. You can have a negative assessment saying that your plan or your project has a negative impact on your Natura 2000 site, but you can carry out that plan or project anyway if it's of overriding public interest, okay, including those of social and economic nature. Please notice that overriding is a very strong word, and it's not private interest, but public interest. For example, the construction of a highway could be very important from a strategic point of view for the economy of a member state. So that's an example of overriding public interest. But then if you construct something that has a negative impact on a Natura 2000 site, the member state has to take compensatory measures necessary to ensure the overall coherence of the Natura 2000 network. What's the relationship between environmental impact assessment or environmental, I think it's called strategic appraisal? Appropriate assessment can be done and included in environmental impact assessment studies. For example, they can be done together. But even if you have projects to which environmental impact assessment does not apply, or the strategic appraisal in the case of a plan does not apply, you have to do appropriate assessment anyway, okay? So appropriate assessment, valutazione di incidenza, is much more common than environmental impact assessment studies. So I already told you about the difference between project, which is physical work, and plan, which is a tool to organize the management of a landscape, okay, for example. And appropriate assessment applies to both of them. The most important thing is, what do we mean by plan or project which has a significant effect on a Natura 2000 site? It means the probability that the plan or project has effects on the integrity of the Natura 2000 site. And then you can ask, but what does integrity mean? Integrity means a quality or condition of wholeness or completeness in the sense of coherence of the structure and ecological function of a site in its size, or of a habitat, complex of habitats, or population of species. You see, it's a very long and fuzzy definition. Of course, the main message here is that a significant effect on a Natura 2000 site is very much site dependent. It depends on the habitats that you have there. It depends on the species that you have there. It depends on their pre-existing conservation status, and it has to be evaluated case by case. Okay, so it's a very specific work of assessment. Of course, you can have positive effects, but what we care about are negative effects. The incidenza in Italian, the possibility that the plan or project has significant effects which are negative. Yeah, you see, negative effects for the integrity in fulfilling the objective of the Natura 2000 network. Negative effect on the conservation status of a species habitat. So it's very site specific. Let's go on. Quite quickly. There are many policies in Italy about this. We have a Republic President decree from 1997, the two most important, and another one from 2003. If you want a link to legislation, you can visit the website. And the problem, why do we have two decrees? Because the decrees from 1997, remember the directive is from 1992. The decree from 1997 underwent an infringement procedure because it did not include as targets for appropriate assessment all plans or projects which can have significant negative effect on a Natura 2000 site. It listed categories of projects that should undergo appropriate assessment. So since the directives say all plans or projects that can have an effect, we had an infringement procedure in Italy, and then this was fixed with the decree from 2003. Regions and provincial autonomy in Italy are the public bodies responsible for the management of the Natura 2000 sites, even though the Ministry of the Environment created guidelines for managing the Natura 2000 network. And guidelines for the management are found in this policy piece from 2002. And the valutazione di incidenza procedure is described in Article 6 of the presidential, President of the Republic decree from 2003. And yeah, it basically is very similar to what I told you about so far, which was found in the Habitats Directive. So Article 6 also says that projects are already subject to environmental impact assessment. For them, appropriate assessment can be included in the environmental impact assessment procedure. And this procedure is basically boils down to the preparation of a report, a study made according to Annex G of the DPR from 1997, which describe the plan or project, the works to be done, the size of the work, the complementarity with other plans or projects, the resources used, the waste produced, the emissions, of these things. And now this plan or project affects the environmental system, so habitats and species. And there are some minimum requirements for this kind of report study. For example, regarding the spatial scale, it has to be at least this one. And those reports will be assessed by regions unless you deal with plans with national relevance, and then the assessor is the Ministry of the Environment, which now is Ecological Transition Ministry. There are also European guidelines, even though regions are the competent authorities in Italy, which have, if you're not so familiar with English, there's an unofficial translation by the Venezia Giulia region that you can find online if you search on a browser. And so, final slides. How is a valutazione di incidenza procedure done in practice? In practice, you have 4 steps. You have the screening step, the appropriate assessment, the analysis of alternative solutions, and the definition of compensatory measures. Usually, for most plans or projects, you stop at the screening phase, okay? And that's, yeah, the most important. So in the screening phase, by definition, by the very meaning of the word, what you do is to explore the possibility that the implementation of your plan or project will cause a significant effect on the conservation objective of the site. You see, are not directly connected or not necessary to the management of the Natura 2000 site. Of course, if you have a project or plan connected to the management needed for managing, improving the Natura 2000 site, you don't need to do the appropriate assessment, the VINCA, okay? However, if your project is not necessary for the management of the Natura 2000 site, or if your management project has significant effects on another Natura 2000 site, you must do the VINCA assessment. So in the screening phase, these are information that you have to include. Actually, the Veneto region, as if you search on a browser, on a search engine, sorry, you'll find that the Veneto region has a very detailed guideline about how you can implement this valutazione di incidenza. Okay, but as a general rule, in the screening phase, you describe the goal of the plan or project. You quantify the plan or project, meaning size, sort of space cover, water abstraction, emissions, waste relative in terms of kilos of volume, duration of the construction phase, of the operation phase, of the decommissioning phase. Think, for example, a landfill in the case of a project, period of the duration of the plan, or distance from the Natura 2000 site, and you also list cumulative impacts with other plans or projects. Which are important. Remember the salami slicing thing I was telling you about. And also, in addition to describing the project, you have to describe Natura 2000 site, and in particular, assess with the tools that you think are fit to do this. Of course, is site specific. So you have to assess the significance or the magnitude of the possible effects of your plan or project on the site. For example, loss of habitats in percentage, fragmentation, changes in the main elements of the site, such as water quality, and so on. Just an example to show you that it's very difficult to give you general rules about, sorry, I'm trying to, the draw tool, but it's not gonna work. Okay, so no. Or you don't see it, but I'm not able to pick up the drawing tool because it keeps on disappearing. But now I made it. Okay, let's suppose you have a forest like this. And let's suppose you lose this area here. I don't know, is 10%, 5%. And based on your analysis, you decide that losing 5% of the forest is not a big deal, okay? And it's not a significant impact on the integrity of the site. Let's suppose that the same surface is not spread here, but you lose 5% of the forest like this, okay? A very tiny strip across the forest. This is 5% of the surface of the site. This is 5% of the surface of the site. The case B is much worse than case A because they are the same, of course, if you look at the impact in terms of surface loss. But if you look at the impact in terms of connectivity loss, case B is very much worse because let's suppose that this is a road, okay? This is a road, something like this. And if you have a road, as in case B, cutting the forest in half, you decrease the resilience of the site much more than in case A. Remember the fire example I was talking about. Okay, so loss of habitats can indeed be a possible criterion to assess impacts, but there are many others which are site and project specific, such as in this example. For example, fragmentation. This is just an example, okay? It's very much site and project specific, this kind of exercise. If there are no significant effects, you don't need to proceed to the next step of the appropriate assessment. And usually you stop here, okay? But if there are significant effects according to the screening phase, you get to the second step of the procedure, which is called appropriate assessment, which basically is a much better, more detailed study of impacts, okay, where you have to list mitigation measures. So can the effects of my plan or project be reduced? And you have to explain how, for example, which tools are you going to use and when. For example, a typical case of mitigation is, I don't know, I cut my vegetation because I want to do forest management, and that cutting can have an impact on birds on birds nesting, on bird reproduction, okay? But if you do the cut in a season when birds are not reproducing, sorry, that's a mitigation measure. You avoid the negative impact of your work by shifting it in time. The third step of the VINCA procedure is the analysis of alternative solutions. It can happen that your negative effects on the site integrity remain in spite of the mitigation measures. Then you must list alternative solutions to your plan or project. And of course, I don't know, instead of a road, you construct a railway, I don't know. However, you must do appropriate assessment for each one of the alternative solutions, of course, because it's a new plan or project. Or you have to list why these alternative solutions are impractical. If you find no practical alternative solution, the plan or project can only be done for reasons of outstanding public interest. So in a long-term perspective. And at the same time, by the adoption of compensatory measures. Even more, if the site hosts a priority natural habitat type or species, you know, if you look at the Habitat Directive at the Annex 1 and 2, there are habitats and species which are marked with the star, with an asterisk. Those are the most important species and habitats to be protected. They're called priority habitats and species. They are special habitats and species that must be protected with the highest priority. If your site concerns a priority habitat or species, the one with the asterisk in the annexes of the directive from 1992, your plan or project can only be done for reasons relating to human health or public safety. Or you have to ask an opinion from the Commission if you are referring to other imperative reasons of public interest. You see, in this first case, you can have economic interest as a reason of outstanding public interest. If you have a priority habitat or species, you know economy, you have reasons relating to human health or public safety. Or you have to ask the permission to the Commission, basically. You have to get an opinion from the Commission. So you see that this kind of protection for Natura 2000 sites is quite strong. So if the fourth step of the appropriate assessment procedure is the project is unavoidable, it's overriding public interest, then take compensatory measures. For example, compensatory measure, one example could be you have to, I don't know, destroy the forest because you have an oil pipe going underneath the forest and you have to construct it. So you destroy the forest, you put the oil pipe underneath the ground, and then you reconstruct the forest. You plant the forest trees again. This is just an example. You can have types of compensatory measures. And I would like to close this lecture with, for those of you who live in this region, in the Veneto region, this is linked to regional legislation, regional policies about this. Some of them quite recent, in particular a methodological guide to carry out the VINCA assessment. And these are some useful links to Natura 2000 network material and to appropriate assessment material on the web. So for today, it took me a bit longer than expected, so sorry for that. I know this lecture should be around 45 minutes, so we're done. If you have any questions, it's the moment to ask. Otherwise, and you also have my emails if questions come up to you later. Okay, I get there is no questions, right? So thank you for taking part to this lecture, and see you next time. Important message, the next time I would like this lecture to be dual, so it will be both Zoom and in class, okay? I will let you know the class after planning with Professor Palmeri. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, bye.
Bye.
Alberto, aspetta un attimo.
Certo, ferma la registrazione.
Ah sì.